All right, babies, we are going to look at example number 1, take 2, because we are going to look at part B in this example, or in this video. You know what I meant. All right, so we've got 100 volunteers suffering from indigestion, and we have a new indigestion medication. There are 50 men and 50 women. Okay, so in part A, in the other video, we designed a completely randomized comparative experiment to test the new drug. So if you'll recall in that other video, we started out with our 100 volunteers, and then of course we randomly placed them with the new drug, and then I think I used a placebo for the control. So that's what a completely randomized experiment looks like. Well, when we look at part B, what we need to note is that we are designing a comparative experiment again, just like in the last example or the last part of it, but this time we're blocking on gender. So the only reason we would block is because we believe that men and women will respond differently to this drug and therefore affect our results. So anytime we believe that a certain characteristic will affect my outcome, that is how I block, and I block on that characteristic. And your blocks are always going to be homogeneous. In other words, one of my blocks will have a certain characteristic and the other block won't, or it'll have a completely different characteristic. So what would this look like? Well, I'm going to take my 100 volunteers, okay, and I'm going to block them on gender. So I'm going to put the men here and the women here. So I've got 50 men and I've got 50 women. Blocking is always done consciously and on purpose. It is not random, all right? So once you get them into separate blocks, so I've got a block of men and a block of women, then I create within each block a comparative experiment in which I randomly, okay, so I've got randomize here, randomly place them into the treatment group. So I've got group 1, that's going to consist of just half the men, so 25 men, and these people are going to be my control group, and they're going to receive the placebo. And it doesn't have to be a placebo, it could be an old indigestion medication, but since I'm not given any information about that, I'm just going to say placebo. So then I'm going to have group 2. This is going to be the other 25 men, and this is going to be my treatment group, and they're going to receive the new medication. All right, I'm going to do the exact same thing for the women. So I'm going to randomize again, and we're going to have group 3, and it's going to consist of 25 women, and they're going to be the control for the women, and they're going to receive the placebo, and then I'll have group 4, and that's going to be 25 women, and they're going to get the treatment, which is the new medication, if I could write. Okay, now one of the things you have to remember about blocking is that once we separate our volunteers, in this case between men and women, I am never going to bring them back together. So I am just going to compare indigestion levels for the men, and I'm going to compare them separately for the women. So the thing you need to remember here about comparing at the end of your experiment when you block, once you block, you don't ever undo the blocks. They stay apart because you blocked them because you think there's some characteristic, in this case gender, that you think is going to affect the result. So you don't ever compare them back to each other again. All right, and to help you understand blocking a little bit better, let me give you another example. Actually, I don't have another example on here, but let me get to a blank space. All right, this idea of blocking, all right, let's say that I have a new hair care product, okay? And I believe that people with curly hair and people with straight hair will be affected differently by this new hair care product. So because I believe that their hair type might affect my results, I would want to block on hair type. And you can get as specific with this as you want. I mean, we could have several different groups. We could have completely straight hair, slightly wavy hair, curly hair, etc., etc. So when I block, I'm going to block consciously. So I would block these into two groups of curly hair and straight hair. And then the randomization occurs. And it could be, you know, the hair care product could be an old hair care treatment versus a new treatment. And it doesn't always have to be two things. I mean, maybe we could have, you know, something else in here. Maybe like, I don't know, maybe there's a placebo or something like that. So this is just another example of how we would block. And again, everyone in this block has curly hair. Everyone in this block has straight hair. So that's what I mean by blocking homogeneously. Another thing that you probably noticed in your notes was this idea of a matched pair. And it is a form of blocking. And a matched pair design would look something like this. Let's say I've got 30 students and I want to run an experiment based on who does better, whether they are in-person learning, perfect for our current times, versus online. Okay, let's say I get to choose. I get to randomly put you somewhere. All right, so if I've got 30 students and I think the GPA of these students might affect how well they're doing, what I would do is I would put them in order with the top GPA all the way down to the lowest GPA. And then what I would do is I would pair them up. So let's say I've got student number 1, student number 2, student 3, student 4, etc., all the way down to student 30. Now, the way a matched pair would look, I would group these first two students because their GPAs are probably very similar to one another, and then I would randomly place them in either in-person or online learning. And then I would pair these and I would do the same thing. And an easy way to randomize this for this first group, I would just say, you know what, I'm going to flip a coin. If it lands on heads, they go to in-person learning. If it lands on tails, they go to online learning. And then that's how I would pair them. So that's why we call it a matched pair design. So hopefully that helps you understand blocking a little bit better. Have fun.